Alright, peace. This is Brother High John. Today I'm going to be dealing with the fact that the physical body is hell. About 3 to 5 reasons why the physical body is hell. But first, I got to quote the scripture. This is going to be out of the Upanishads. Okay, it says, "This body, generated by the sex act, it is hell, by bones covered with flesh and skin, filled with fæces and urine." But first, we got to deal with the word, the etymology, the English word. Now, hell, in the sense of the Sanskrit that's written here, would have been patala or naraka, and so on. These are different words that mean hell. Patala or naraka or kalichi. Kalichi is a word that's the root word of the word in English that we have hell. Hell comes from kel. Kel comes from cow. Cow is kalichi. And I'll put a reference so you'll be able to see that kalichi is the origin of the concept hell. To our surprise, what you'll be surprised to find out is that the word skeleton, meaning the physical body, is made up of what? The skeleton. The skeleton. So that's one aspect of the body. Next aspect of the body is the physical flesh. The flesh is made up of what? Cells. That word skeleton comes from the word hell. The word cell comes from the word hell. So hell, cells, skeleton, and skull, your physical brain, your skull that you were born with, that is what's trapping us in this material physical world. Because like I said, this physical body is the state of hell, is the consciousness of hell, the lowest of the spiritual awareness, the spiritual consciousness. So with that, with the etymology of hell, you'll be able to see that the words cell, skeleton, and skull is the same etymological root and origin of the word hell. It's the same words. So like I said, in that should give us insight that that word cell or skull or skeleton itself should tell us that the physical body is the same as hell. It's one and the same. So the second point I'm going to make is we have to understand that heaven basically is the highest of the spiritual worlds, or the highest world, the highest dimension, and in that world is non-physical. It's as least dense as anywhere in the cosmos, right? It's in the spiritual world. That's why we say spirit versus material, or spirit versus physical, because spirit is the least dense in the whole cosmic universe. Now, like I said, the second point I was making was that heaven is the highest of the spiritual planes, or the highest plane of existence, and it's the least dense, or the least physical. It's non-physical. But hell would have to be the very opposite, and have to be the extreme of the duality, which means it would have to be the most physical, the most material, and the most dense. Well, that is the realms of which we are in, this physical world. So in hindsight, we know that hell would have to be the very opposite, or the very far point of duality away from heaven. Hell would have to be the most what? Physical. You have to understand, all of that's synonymous and corresponds to our physical body. You go into Greek mythology, it says that Zeus slayed the Titans. Titans basically meaning demons or primordial chaos beings. He slayed these Titans, and he trapped them into the physical world. He trapped them into the physical world that we call the earth, and he mixed the Titans' blood with the earth, and that becomes man, or mankind, or humans. The mixture of the demons, or the Titans, and the physical earth, that becomes the human body. You get it? So we're made up of that element of Tartarus, or hell, because in the Greek mythology they call that realm Tartarus. The third point I wanted to make is that the word body, now we dealt with the word hell, but now let's deal with the word body. The word body, the etymological root, the root of that word, the origin of that word body, comes from Indo-European and also Sanskrit as well. It's associated with the Sanskrit with the word bu. So the root of the word body comes from the word bu. Now, why is bu important? Because bu is a realm. Remember, there's seven heavens, or 7 realms that correspond in our body, that we might call chakras, and that correspond with the external world that we call the cosmos. There's 7 worlds that make up the cosmos. The lowest of those 7 worlds is bu loka. Loka means world. Bu means physical world, or the earth, the physical plane. And inside of bu loka, there's 7 more worlds inside of bu loka that are 7 lower planes below the higher 7. So it's 7 below the 7, and they all condensed and contained within bu loka, and they're called the patala realms, or the lower hellish realms. Now those 7 hellish realms are basically the general experience of suffering and horror we may experience simultaneously with some of the higher worlds while we're on a physical plane. Because remember, all of these worlds are as above so below, that we're all experiencing them simultaneously. But that bu is the physical world. So bu, the word body, comes from the word bu. Remember, bu is made up of those 7 lower worlds, the 7 lower hells. Also, you got to break it down from this extent as well, is that Buloka is the Muladhara chakra, or the root chakra, the lowest of the 7 chakras. So it's not only the lowest of the 7 worlds, it's the lowest of the 7 chakras inside of our body. It's your physical flesh. We're made up of 7 layers or 5 layers called sheaths or koshas, and the highest layer being God, or the spiritual self itself, or your soul itself, and the outer and last and most gross form, most physical form, is your actual body, your flesh, your cells, right? Your skin, your cells. So to abandon and ascend from hell is to abandon and ascend from the physical body. It's one and the same. So all of the implications of this, you should be able to put together yourself. You should be able to understand this yourself. Okay, so it says, this body generated by the sex act, it is hell. So this body generated by the sex act. Why did they mention the sex act? Well, I posted another video on my page, and it's basically called Lust is the Gate to Hell. And it goes into a pretty good elaboration and breakdown of how lust is the gate to this physical world that I'm saying in this tape is hell, right? But lust is the gate to the physical body being formed in the womb and us entering into this physical plane. So that's why it says this body generated by the sex act, it is hell. It says by bones covered with flesh and skin, filled with feces and urine, meaning it's grotesque, it's low, it's very far away from the spiritual or heavenly states, the highest states. So number 5 was, I got to make sure you understand that when we say hell, we mean mythology. We don't mean literal. This is not literal. This is mythology. All mythology, basically heaven, hell, angels, demons, the war of the heavens, all of these different concepts, spirits, angels, ghosts, fairies, gnomes, elves, all of that is mythology, some of it folklore. And it's metaphysical concepts that are put in stories that are supposed to describe esoteric or hidden deep meanings that you can only learn through the subconscious through learning these stories. And they help unravel the mystery of the whole material world and spiritual world. So that's the point of mythology. Mythology does not necessarily mean it's not real. It means it's not literally real. We're explaining it as an allegory or symbolic or as a metaphor. So hell is exactly that. It's a metaphor. It's an allegory. It's a symbol that's supposed to embody and represent this physical world itself. So the last point I'm going to make is we have to understand that the demons and hell is always associated, right? So I want you to remember, I mentioned the Greek mythology and how Zeus slayed the Titans and imprisoned them in the physical world that we call the earth. And humans are made up of a mix between the Titans and the humans. Now, if we go to Hebrew cosmology, right, from the Levant, what we call the biblical narrative, or the Judean and Israelite narrative from the Bible, we hear this whole idea of 1/3 of the angels being cast out of heaven and being imprisoned in the earth, right? So if they're imprisoned in the earth, and that's where hell is, under the earth, then how is it that demons end up possessing human beings? How do demons end up in the mythology and the cosmology possessing human beings in the Hebrew cosmology and Hebrew spiritual system? Well, because you have to understand, in that mythological story of the Hebrews cosmology, they're explaining how our souls, which are primordial, which were before the creation of this physical world, which you might say were in the nebulas and stars and these constellations and these higher realms, was cast out and were magnetically compelled to trap ourselves or to fall into this physical world. So our original home was the spiritual world, but we fell and got trapped in this physical dimension. And that's what that cosmology in the Hebrew culture and the Hebrew system is dealing with. It's dealing with the fall of these particles of stars called photons being trapped, big balls of hydrogen gas we call stars, those photons being trapped in the physical world, this earth, this dimension. And when those sparks of light get trapped in a physical form, they end up creating carnal or physical thoughts. Because remember, all of those sparks and photons that come from the stars, they are our very neurons and our transmitters in our brain. They are all throughout our nervous system and our bodies. What we breathe is what we eat, is what we think. All of that is made up of what we call hydrogen gas. Hydrogen gas and helium gas, nitrogen, all of these different compounds and chemicals, they come from the stars, from the heavenly world. And they fell and got trapped in the illusion of these physical bodies. Now we're trapped here perpetually through what it said earlier, the sex act, right? through lust. And if you read many texts like in the Kabbalah and in the Gnostic texts, they talk about how these angels, these fallen angels, these demons, quote unquote, were only trapped here because they were seduced by their desire to mate with a human woman. They were seduced by the human woman. They were sexually attracted to the human woman, and that's what perpetually kept them trapped in this prison, in this bondage. Well, remember, that's an allegory or not literal as well. That's symbolic of humans themselves knowing the knowledge that we come from the spiritual world, but we're trapped here based on our physical desires. It's that simple. And our true and original home was never this physical world. This physical world is only a circumstance. Our immortal and eternal home is beyond this world. And the goal of all of the spiritual masters and spiritual schools and spiritual teachings was to ascend beyond this physical world. It don't matter what the spiritual tradition was. So these demons basically end up being negative thoughts that create the hell that I'm trying to describe to you that we're trapped in. You got to study the 7 princes of hell. Those represent 7 negative thought forms. I'll put a chart on the side of this video so you'll be able to see that. But the 7 princes of hell represent the 7 negative thought forms that come from your body. If you didn't have a body, if you didn't have no physical body, you would not have those demons having the capability of possessing you. The way that demons are able to possess you is because you have the physical body. With the physical body comes those negative principal thoughts, or those negative thoughts, those physical and gross thoughts. But the angels represent the spiritual and divine thoughts, the 7 angels, 7 archangels, the 7 virtues. The demons represent the 7 vices, or the 7 negative thoughts, and the 7 negative acts. So we're breaking down all of those points. That should bring clarity of the metaphor or the esoteric concept that was given and that was conveyed to the world through these ancient texts, these ancient traditions about hell. In Egypt, they call it the Menta, the Duat. The underworld, they call it Kar. I will get into that in a few days. But Kar, that's K-A-R, which is the hellish realms in the Egyptian mythology. The Sumerians and the Babylonians called it Ikala. The Greeks call it Hades, Tartarus. The Hindus call it Naraka, or the Patala realms. Right? So everybody has this version of these hellish realms, and what I'm trying to explain to you is it represents a low state in the cosmos, and it's symbolic of the physical plane. The true meaning of what that hell was has been lost over time through misinterpretation and misconceptions throughout the years, and at some point it got taken to the point of being taught literally after death. And to describe that to you, let me break that down very quickly. Most people are under the conception or misconception that hell is only isolated to be experienced only after death, right? Hell can only be only after death. Now what you have to understand, that's a misconception, and let me break that down and make it thorough for you. When we talk about reincarnation, which I'll be proving in the future, that has been misconceived as well. When we deal with reincarnation, when one dies in the African cultures and many Asian cultures, the concept and the teaching was that you reincarnate through your descendancy or through your ancestral line, that your ancestors continually reincarnate through their seed and through their progeny, through their descendants. So in that sense, what I'm trying to say is, if your ancestors sinned all of their life and they committed so many different violations and so many different things, they were possessed by demons, what we're saying is those demons and that ancestor does not die and go anywhere external. They die and they reincarnate inside of their descendants. And those thought forms, those genes, those memories, those ancestral memories, then get inherited by the descendant or the grandchild or the great-grandchild. You understand? So now that soul that originally lived in another body that we might say is the great-grandparent, now is living in the great-grandchild, living out that hell that was that's the punishment for those sins. That's what karma is. They're living out that state of hell. And this whole physical dimension is that karma, is that price, is that debt, basically as the outcome of our desires, our consciousness seeking dense and physical objects to satisfy our cravings and satisfy our pleasure, the realm of pleasure. Remember, the Garden of Eden is called the Garden of Pleasure. Eden means pleasure. So that's how we got trapped here in the first place. So the misconception is misidentifying the fact that when you are reborn or when you reincarnate, you have already lived. You already have lived and died, and now you're paying for the sins of your past deeds, your past sins. So in that sense, now you're born what? In that state of hell. That state of hell. So hopefully all of these different teachings, all of these different lessons, and all of these different points I made make it pretty clear to you about the origins of hell and the point and the topic of the day that the physical body is hell. That hell and the physical body is synonymous. It's one and the same. There's hell inside of our physical body. I'll explain it one more time. It's our skull, it's our skeleton, it's our cells, which is our skin. And you have to understand that the metaphor was also described as our lower regions, meaning your behind your colon, your digestive tract, all of your digestive organs, your intestines, and your gastrointestinal fire. That is hell, right between the three lower chakras. And those chakras make up the earth, water, and fire. You look at those colors, that's the color of flame. That area of your body and your body itself is the consciousness and the experience of hell that we were born in. What you would have to do to ascend above this realm of hell is reach these higher realms that are inside of the higher points of your body, these higher organs, and reach a state of enlightenment and ascend beyond the physical body and the physical world.